Wednesday marked the 10-year anniversary of Lewis Hamilton, Sir Lewis Hamilton, moving to Mercedes. Everyone doubted that move then. In your all's eyes, was it the best move we've seen in F1 history at this point?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty difficult. I was trying to think of a better one in
Yeah.
recent memory, and there just isn't one. There's definitely a lot of examples of the opposite, really bad career moves that have gone really badly. So rare that someone makes a move that is so perfect and just, has worked in that way. And you're absolutely right about 2012. I mean, I can remember that. And Laurence was working in Formula One at the time. I wasn't, but the perception outside of Formula One certainly was that Lewis had made a huge error. Everyone was saying, "What's he doing?" Mercedes had kind of taken over the Brawn team. They hadn't won. They hadn't won a race. There was I think no, they had won a race in 2012, but they weren't seen as a championship contender. It wasn't seen like they were going to be the next big thing. And Lewis was just sure about it. He said, "No, I'm going to go." And he was Mr. McLaren then. So it seemed wrong at the time. And I remember everyone saying, a lot of very kind of smart pundits were saying this is going to ruin Lewis's career. And you look at some of those takes now and you think, wow, they've like sometimes takes age slightly badly, but those takes all aged as badly as they can. And obviously it's made him the most successful driver in F1 history. So pretty remarkable to think what would have happened had someone else made that move.
No doubt.
If Lewis had turned it down. It's always a great what if, but yeah, amazing move. And I think he deserves a lot of credit for it. It's why when people say it's all the car, you say, well, he had the foresight to see where the project was going. He was very impressed with the way they'd approached the V6 turbo engine project. So yeah, I think whichever way you look at it, he deserves some credit. And I think as well, you also need to be a bit lucky in Formula One. You need to back yourself, make that decision. I don't think he could have even dreamed it was as good as it turned out to be. So yeah, 10 out of 10 for Lewis's move, I'd give it. It's hard to give it anything else.
Laurence, do you remember where you were and what you were doing when that news broke?
I would have been covering I can't remember exactly where I was. I mean, if the news broke around the Singapore Grand Prix, I think that was roughly when the deal was done. I don't know if that's when the news broke. But yeah, I would have been working from the office because I didn't travel back then in 2012 quite so much anyway. So yeah, I can't remember exactly, but I remember it being a big thing. As Nate said, all these people saying it's the wrong move. He should never move there. McLaren is a place to be. Of course, McLaren had won races that year, come close to challenging for the championship, but not quite made it. And so it did seem like a big deal. But I think the other thing for Lewis was that McLaren was the team that he'd grown up at. And it was almost like moving out of his parents' house. It's moving away and creating, we're so used to Lewis now being outspoken and talking about whatever's at the front of his mind. Back then, it didn't happen. It seemed like he was much more controlled by the PR machine at McLaren. And as soon as he went to Mercedes, they gave him that freedom. And it was almost like a coming of age thing, which is strange because he was relatively old at the time. But it really did make a big difference in the way he talked about not just the sport, but everything around it. And then to get to the position that we know him now as a 7-time world champion who speaks so eloquently on so many subjects. But a big part of that was going to Mercedes. And rather than being the kind of kid who had been brought up within the team at McLaren, he was the man that Mercedes was then building the team around. And that was such an important part of his career. And I think so crucial as well to the success that came after because, Lewis was very central to directing the team in the right way for certain things. Of course, the immense work they did on the engine, which is essentially what gave them the head start in 2014, that had already happened pre-Lewis, or it was already being worked on pre-Lewis arriving at Mercedes. But all of the rest of it and continuing that success through the years, that was part of that teamwork that he's had with Mercedes. And remarkably, 10 years on, still exists and is still very strong to this day. I talked to him in Zandvoort and he said that even though they've gone through this backward step this year, obviously they're not as competitive as they were, that's actually motivated him to stay longer in Formula One. And from everything I've heard him say, there's no doubt that will be anywhere other than Mercedes. So yeah, a remarkable decision all those years ago, and one that I think he still thinks can yield more championships in the coming years.
Thanks so much for watching ESPN on YouTube. And for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for premium content and live streaming, subscribe to ESPN Plus.